Okay, now you have it.
Now I've got it. Thank you. Okay, I'm having trouble on all ends. Okay, so I welcome you all to the April 21st meeting of the Law, Rules, and Ethics Committee. As I will note later, we have gotten down to a precious few. Right now, there are 4 members of the committee, which I'll mention a little later. And Steve and I are present. That does not make a quorum. The quorum is made by Sylvia, who has ADA status from the chair of the board, so that under the open meetings law, she counts as as being present and being able to count in the quorum and vote and participate. So we have a quorum by virtue of Sylvia being on the line. We also have with us tonight Julie Reyes, who is chair of the board, and we're very pleased to have her with us. And we have a guest, and we're pleased to have her as well. The agenda was distributed publicly and to the board members. There we are. Welcome introduction of the committee members, which I've just done. First item will be approval of the minutes, which I'll get to in a second. And I've listed a lot of stuff on the chairperson's report. And then we have latest from COIB, which we'll touch on. And the spreadsheet I sent out Thursday, I believe. So everyone has a copy of that. And as I note and before, I no longer go through it to screen it to tell you what I think is important. I ask the chairpersons of each committee, of course, I sort it by committee, city council committee. I ask each chairperson to look at the stuff that could be important to their committee. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. They've been distributed. Are there any comments or thoughts on the minutes? Sylvia, any comment? Sylvia?
You might make that bigger. I don't know how you do it.
I tried. Did I lose Sylvia? Where's participants?
I would do that as a start.
So I'll ask again, Sylvia. Any comments on the minutes?
I'm sorry, I had to leave to get a pen, so I'm not sure what you did.
Do you have any comments on the minutes?
Could you
Motion.
speak a little bit more loudly?
Those aren't movable, are they? I don't think so.
Are you near the speaker?
Sylvia,
I'm at the microphone.
Sylvia,
I have no comment.
Sylvia,
Go on with the meeting.
Sylvia,
No comment.
on your computer, Sylvia, if you can press your button to make it louder, it should come louder. It may be on the top, you may see like a little speaker and an arrow.
Yeah, everything is different, Julie. I can't find what I usually do.
Yeah,
Be on your
I
keyboard.
don't know why.
okay.
But it could see where that mute button is. That's the where she would find her volume.
No, the mute doesn't do volume.
What number are you up to on the agenda? Sorry.
The minutes.
I'm at a loss.
It's not for you.
Okay, we are now approving the minutes. Motion to, I accept the motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Sylvia, do you approve the
Yes,
minutes?
I do.
Okay. Minutes accepted as distributed. I'm gonna try this again. I hope. Here we go again. Okay, second item.
Good.
On the agenda now becomes chair's report, and I have a whole host of items Um,
Huh?
come on, where are we?
I may have to go in the room now.
No,
You jumped past.
I jumped past it. I drew a line to make it easier for me to see. There it is. Chairperson's report. Oh, the numbers got all messed up. So the first comment is discussion to expand our membership. We used to have a healthy number between the people not reapplying and people resigning from the board for whatever reason. We're now down to 4. I strongly doubt that at this time in the calendar, people will switch, but we ought to make an effort for September, certainly with the new members, and hopefully some members will switch to join our committee. And so I raised that, so if you can think of anyone who might be interested, I ask you to beat them up and drag them in.
When do new members begin attending? In the old days, it was June. Can it be earlier?
It totally depends on the
No,
borough
you're gonna
president.
save it for another day.
Well, we should certainly take the opportunity to make an appeal at the general meeting when new members are first present, when we learn that new members are first present. And I know we had a former member, Jessica Sosa, who, might be willing to rejoin, and she has experience on the committee, and that would be good.
I'll reach out, and it's a good idea. I'm trying to remember, depending upon when the borough president does the appointments, if it's in June or in September, the sheets go out then, asking people to sign up, which would normally take place over the summer. If it's done in June, if it's done in September, as it was this past year.
That was an anomaly. Out of 15 years, I don't think it's ever been past the calendar.
Wasn't this the BP's first year? So, second year. All right, so something for us to look at. Second item on the agenda, and I'm gonna skip over this primarily. I had discussed at the last meeting, which was 2 months ago, that I would be in contact with Steve so that we could do some homework on what bills and how far they have gotten, if at all. I did not do that. I've been a little preoccupied. So I commit to that again. The issues before the legislature, as we knew, is an attempt to reduce to 1/4 the requirement for a quorum, which we were against, but our state senator is totally for. There is the question about a required staff training or training for community board members. There's the issue of what I like the best is that they look to see whether or not just having the chair or the designated chair of the committee be present in this room, for example, and everybody else can be on Zoom. I don't know how far that's gone. We ought to research that and certainly look at whether or not we think that's a good idea or not.
Marty, what you have on the expanded agenda, that's the research based on the research that you did.
I did
In the
some
past?
research. I didn't
Okay.
follow through all the way.
Okay.
So many of these numbers are last year's numbers, which I tried looking up and couldn't find them.
Change the number.
Now, an issue came up, maybe I created the issue, but Julie contacted me. We had 2 chairpersons. One, I believe, left the board, one did not apply for reappointment. As a result, there were 2 chair vacancies. And Article 5 of our bylaws, which is a section on officers and committee chairs, Section 3 talks about filling vacancies. Julie was looking at, notwithstanding the provision of this section, upon the occurrence of a vacancy in the position of chairperson, vice chairperson, Upon the occurrence of a vacancy in the position of chairperson, a vice chairperson shall assume the position of the chairperson for the remainder of the term. Then says the election to fill any vacancy shall take place upon written notice not later than the second regular meeting following the creation of the vacancy. Now, I thought there was a conflict here, an intent. I also remember a former board member who used to go crazy over this. It's gotta be the second meeting or else we're gonna hang you. So the question is, and Julie took the position that in one of those chair positions, there was already an available vice chair who under this became the chair. And in the other case, the vice chair happened to be the chair of a second committee, and you can't be chair of two committees. As a result, at the last board meeting, there was an election, and that position was filled in that election. So I'm raising this just for us to clarify, so there's no conflict, there's no misunderstanding of the intent. Have you had a chance to look at this?
I just read it now, and I admit that I thought that I understood, but without going back and reading the bylaws in past years, that we needed to hold an election within 2 meetings of the vacancy. I agree that was my understanding. And I also agree with you that these two sentences juxtaposed seem like they are in conflict. The way that one might read it in such a way that it wouldn't be in conflict is that the vice chairperson would serve until the election, which will be held within 2 months.
But this says remainder of the term. In this case, it's 2 months, but it could be
Right. I know.
September.
Yeah, I'm saying if you were a judge trying to harmonize the provisions without finding it to be void, you would read it to try to, read it in harmony. But this is the bylaws itself, which would require, I think, two votes of the board to change. But it may be, but that would open it for discussion as to whether, what is the best way to approach it. Some committees have vice chairs who are very active and very able to step in, and others don't. This assumes that every vice chair shall assume the position, and that may not be the best. A vacancy can also occur in October. Not everyone would necessarily want that, that election to be postponed until the following spring, June. So I think it raises, you can either read it to give the chair some wiggle room, which is the way it was read this year, in this instance, or you can throw this open to an amendment of the bylaws and pin it down.
Unless, I'm looking at it and thinking of a third thing, and that is chairperson and vice chairperson in the first sentence might refer to chair of the board, since the vice chair is also an elected position, as opposed to vice chairs of committees, which are selected positions. In which case, I'm saying that the author of the bylaws, as much as I love and respect him, may have left out a word.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, so the way I read it rather, is the reason that we didn't have an election for the budget. The reason that we did have an election was because the first sentence states, upon the death, resignation, or termination, when there is a vacancy, then that's when we have to have the board elect a new chair. And there was no death, resignation, or termination.
Well, there was a termination of board membership by virtue of someone not reapplying. which
No, that's
may,
not termination. Termination is if we terminate them or if the borough president terminates them and then they are no longer chair or get removed.
I
Like they
guess-
weren't terminated, they just didn't reapply. They weren't terminated. It's like when you leave your job, you're not terminated, you just leave your job, you don't come back.
Well,
right, but the way it reads, Julie, and again, I don't have a right answer, but I read termination of board membership can occur either by voluntary resignation or it can occur because someone doesn't reapply. Their board membership is terminated.
Yeah.
They haven't been terminated in the sense that you were, describing as being fired, and removal is a separate word here. Removal of any officer or elected committee chairperson would suggest that, the board had removed them. So I would suggest, again, just this is a guess, that termination of board membership would cover someone not reapplying. That would constitute the termination of one's board membership. But that's just, again, your reading is as good as anybody else's and entitled to more deference since you're the chair.
Mhm.
But this is pretty, now that you bring the first sentence back into it, I suppose that could be worded a little bit better.
it also negates my thought. In specific talks about committees.
Well, the first sentence distinguishes officer from elected committee chairperson. It doesn't, I mean, I don't know.
Doesn't clarify it,
Solves
either
your
way.
second sentence. So I guess the LRE committee probably should reach some conclusion, although it may not be pressing, about whether we want to submit an amended paragraph for consideration by the full board and a vote to amend the bylaws. It's one of those parts of the bylaws that, I mean, I would say is more important than some others because it has such an operational impact on the board.
I repeat again, we had a board member who went nuts over this thing.
Well, that was
He went nuts over a lot of things.
right. But the fact is, it is Julie had to deal with this ambiguity, and you did.
I found
I
it
know.
funny because if it were not for the first sentence, then you wouldn't need the second. Because then it would just clearly state if there is a vacancy of the chairperson, then we must hold an election, but that's not the case.
I'm gonna cut the baby in half, and I think we should talk about clarification of this piece, but not at the moment. It is not pressing at the moment. So I'd like to believe the committee will be larger in September, and we should take this up then, just to clarify it. Or not.
Well, I will volunteer to, assuming this is a document I can copy and paste, I'll volunteer to make
Oh, it's online. so-
tender a suggestion.
Well, it should be on your what I emailed to you.
Yeah,
You can copy and paste that,
that's all I meant.
but it's also in the bylaws.
So I will volunteer to propose to the committee a draft amendment that's easy to see,
Fine.
easy to understand.
Sylvia, any comment?
No, I don't. I don't have a comment.
All right, next item, numbers got weirded out. I love this thing.
No one else can see, well, I guess they can see it on the screen.
At actually, the commission the Civic Engagement Commission, I'm really not sure what their full responsibilities are. But last year, 2 years ago, they engaged in offering to community board members training sessions on parliamentary procedure. And I attended a couple of them. And I was very much distressed by it because I learned a word from them, which you can see in the third line, last word. They love the word precedence. That means when you start looking at what rules you have to follow, there's a question of what precedes the other. precedents. So they kept on pointing to precedents, and yet they even mentioned the open meetings law, and they mentioned the city charter, and they mentioned bylaws, but they never went the extra step to find out whether or not there was a conflict between Robert's rules, which they are the experts in, or the three other preceding documents over Robert's rules. And so I found it distressing, and I had a lot of conversation back and forth with the head of the commission, Benjamin Solitaire, which I complained because when you say know what the laws are, then when you make a presentation to the community board for the sake of the community board, you ought to be telling them what precedents exist. So when they say it's a good idea that you do minutes, it's a good idea that you send out an agenda, it's a good idea, you can have a 3/4 vote. I mean, there's a whole list of things they kept saying, which may be valid under Robert's rules, but are in violation of the city charter and the open meetings law. What they say is a good idea, for us is a requirement. Anyhow, they did the presentation. They were very informative. I think the executive board members enjoyed the presentation, but I made this same comment after they concluded and left the Zoom. And that is, we know what's required of us. So when they say it's a good idea, it goes beyond a good idea. So I just the board sent out the slide presentation of Civic Engagement Commission with some dialogues to make life easier for them. But I just want to, and will remind the board members about OML, Open Meetings Law, and City Charter. City Charter, for example, says we used to have in our bylaws a 2/3 vote, but we are told under the City Charter that no such thing. Everything is majority.
Marty, I think I was present at this exec. This was a presentation that was made just to exec, right?
Right.
And my recollection, but I could be wrong, is that this wasn't a government employee. She ran a business in which
Right.
she would educate people, like a continuing education kind of business.
She has a title under the parliamentarian rules, and she belongs to an organization of parliamentarians. And she was good, but I still make this observation.
Right. So she really, I think that what she was doing was she was doing her best to teach you parliamentary rules without purporting, I think as it turned out, to tell you about how New York City works. I think that's the disconnect. It was my impression from that evening. But they shouldn't be sending people to educate community boards and overlook proceedings.
The disconnect is when you say, I'm doing this for the sake of community boards knowing what their responsibilities are,
Right.
and then you're not knowing what they are.
Right, correct. So what is your proposal? That you're gonna remind the borough president's office that this has to be fixed? Or that you're
Just
gonna,
the board members.
just board
Just
members?
when you look at it, know that you should know what OML
Did
is.
this already go out to all board members or not?
Yes,
The PowerPoint?
yes. Farah sent it out about 2 weeks ago or so.
I didn't remember that.
Now for one of these hot button issues, it's kind of stuck up on us. We got a communication. Let's start over again. An unnamed, because I'll stick in that category, an unnamed candidate, self-declared candidate for mayor, put out a position paper in which that position paper says, I guess if I become mayor, I have this wonderful idea of taking 4 golf courses in New York City. 2 of them happen to be Van Cortlandt and Marshall, and turn them into housing projects to alleviate the housing shortage in the city. The Parks Committee sought to discuss this because the issue at hand is a parks alienation, which requires not the mayor to decide, but the state legislature to decide. And so that item got onto the, it was placed on, was placed on the Parks Committee's agenda. To my knowledge, and I have to go, I think I'm 100% correct, no names were used. The issue on the agenda was parks alienation. So that caused Chris Hammer, who is the, what's his title? Deputy General Counsel of the Committee on the Conflict of Interest Board, to send to Julie, I'll call it a directive, in which the city conflicts of interest law prohibits any city resources being used for political purposes, which would include discussion of candidates for city office. We advise that this item must be removed from the agenda because it involves a political campaign. Well, this confused a lot of people. And I'll cycle back to this. Why can't we discuss political issues? And this struck us as totally, I'll say, incomprehensible. Chuck wrote a rather extensive, and you all have copies of these. Chuck sent a rather extensive letter to Mr. Hammer, in which he challenged the constitutionality of such a directive, that we can't discuss a political issue even if we don't discuss the political candidate. The issue at hand is not, this is a good guy, vote for him, or this is a bad guy, vote against him, but it's an issue that was raised, and we're going to be able to talk about it. In addition, that letter was never responded to. In addition, Julie sent a letter asking the same basic question, but not as long and extensive as was Chuck's, and the same question she raised. With discussion of building housing on parkland, question, impermissible if the information was taken from a political candidate's proposal. This is public information. It was sent out. So the question was there. Then we got an answer. Julie got an answer. Good afternoon, Julie. It wouldn't be a conflict for important policy questions such as building housing on parkland. Whoa, this sounds like a reversal. To be discussed at the community board, including details that might be taken from a candidate's platform. So first we got, get this thing off your agenda. You can't talk about it. And now we're getting, you could talk about it. Against the wishes of my co-chair, my vice chair, who said, don't send that letter. It's already been answered. I sent this letter to, I called him Attorney Hammer. I don't know why. That's his title, I guess. To our understanding, the board, as enumerated under the city charter, cannot discuss any elected official or candidate as an individual that might give the impression that the board has a favorable or unfavorable opinion of said political figure. Now, the question that was raised, two questions were raised at our last community board meeting. One, we voted, not unanimously, we voted to support legislation brought up by our assemblyman in the state assembly. Well, it's the question of wearing masks at public events, which I don't want to get into. The issue is we supported it And we all knew we were talking about our assemblyman. So the question was, if we can't talk about an elected official, what happens if the elected official is known to everyone? Can't we still talk about it? More importantly, what happens if this were an election year for the assembly and our assemblyman was a candidate for re-election? Could we not talk about it again? So this became very confusing to me, which is why I asked for clarification. So I sent this off to Attorney Hammer, and he didn't respond right away. I contacted Alex Kipp, asking if he could pursue why I didn't get a response. He wrote back, "You'll be getting a response." And very shortly thereafter, I got a response from Mr. Hammer, who said, "You're getting a response." And I finally got a response, actually all in one day. And I want to point out here, before we were sending emails, now I have a case number. This was they raised the importance of all this. So this could be confusing or not. This means, for example, that CB8 members may not use their community board titles to endorse a candidate for elective office. We agree to that. Nor may a CB8 resolution or public statement support or oppose a candidate for elective office. Meaning that if we liked or disliked this particular candidate, it doesn't mean that we cannot talk about, because we can talk about whether or not we like his position statement, which is of distress to us. And then he broke it down by question. Can Community Board 8, that's my question. The response is, can CB8 support or oppose proposed legislation on a matter germane to the district? Response, yes. I missed one here, obviously. And the next question, in supporting or opposing this proposed legislation, can CB8 identify the sponsor of legislation and the position the legislator represents? So if our assemblyman named brought this up and we discussed, not that we like or dislike the assemblyman, the question was, did we like or dislike the item brought before the state assembly? The answer is yes, and we can name him. Does this change if the sponsor of legislation representing Community 8's district is also a candidate for re-election? Response, no. So what I'm getting to in all of this, and I sent this all to the committee members, is that what we did, what we were challenged on, was perfectly appropriate. As long as we did not name the candidate in a way of saying this dopey candidate or this great candidate, we just said we don't like the approach to this issue. And the issue again is the alienation of parks. We were totally legit. Now, I raised this. In addition, this I apparently did not share. I got it earlier late last week. The last from COIB. You have two separate issues here, which I find fascinating. Misuse of city time and resources. In August 2024, the Commissioner of New York City Department of Transportation, while delivering official remarks from the stage at a DOT-organized summer streets event, urged the assembly crowd to support Kamala Harris for president. The city's conflict of interest law prohibits public servants from using city time or city resources to support political campaigns. To resolve this violation, the commissioner agreed to pay $1,750 as a fine. Now, that is not what we were doing. And I find it quite informative. Second example, in February 2024, New York City Police Department designated an assistant commissioner. I love the titles. The commissioner screwed up, and the assistant commissioner received a written notice from the board staff advising him that, as a policymaker, he was prohibited from soliciting donations for candidates for city elective office. In June 2024, the assistant commissioner solicited and collected 15 donations totaling $4,100 for Mayor Eric Adams' reelection campaign. To resolve his violation, and of course I love this phrase, the now former assistant commissioner paid $5,000 fines to the board. Well, it's good, he raised $4,000, they had to pay a fine of $5,000.
Hi.
So
I got bumped off the meeting. Can you ask them to be back in?
Sure, hold on.
I
You're
just
right.
got to go.
Yeah, okay, I'll ask him.
Thank you.
Oh, that was true.
Marty, excuse me for interrupting, but Julie got kicked off of the screen. Could you let her in again, please?
No,
No?
No, she should be admitted now.
and she missed the best part. Well, I'm not doing it again though. So I need to go back to the original email from Christopher Hammer saying we can't do this, and yet his response to me is that we can do it. And the committee, the conflict of interest board put out two of these findings, dispositions, indicating absolute violations of that rule, which we did not do or intend to do.
There are probably many, many ways to violate this part of the conflict of interest law. These are two egregious examples, obviously, when you say everyone must vote a certain way or urge them to, or raise money for a candidate. That's clearly someone's official position being used for partisan political ends. But the situation that we were presented with turned out to be, I think, sloppiness on the part of the COIB without any bad intent, I think. And fortunately, the board and you, Marty, were so on the ball that I think we now have pretty clearly established that there is no public issue that we may not discuss, whether or not it's part of any particular candidate's platform, but that we should continue to avoid endorsing any candidate for political office, whether it's an election year or not, by the way, since once someone gets elected, they're already running for the next,
Yes.
So I think we've put this to bed, and I think all the questions that were asked and answered makes it clear to me that we were never on the wrong side of the law.
Well, for me, the most important issue is that for posterity, I now have a case number. And time will move forward. So I think, as Steve said, we put this saga to rest, and all is well in the world. I think our guest left.
Marty, could I say something before you get into a different topic?
Go ahead.
I don't know if you remember or that you saw it because you were on the board before me. But during my time, when the applications were resubmitted for a new term, there used to be a paper that said that you could not do anything public, do anything electioneering for anyone while you were on the board. That was a no-no. And I'm not quite sure if I understand why Debbie put that on the agenda under Brad Lander's name. She could have put it in as a topic for discussion the alienation of Parkland, and none of this would have happened. So nobody would have said that you can't discuss it. I think this is all just a lot of fluff for nothing. I understand how Chuck feels. I understand how you feel. Steve is kind of on my wavelength, not totally, but partially. And I really think that the chairs of the committees should be told that they can't do that. They can't, especially in an election year, put down somebody's name. I mean, certainly everyone wants the parkland to stay parkland. And if you alienate it, they're going to be up in arms. So it could be discussed without a name being tagged on it, especially in an election year. So I think that's something that we have to do as a committee.
I just note that you're the only one to mention the candidate's name. I haven't, I made a point of not mentioning it. I don't think his name is on the original agenda for parks, only the issue, but I could be wrong. I'll have to go back and look.
He was on the initial. That's what caused the problem, that he was on the initial.
And the third thing, actually, there's four things. And the third thing, I'm not familiar with the document you're referring to, because the prohibition is you cannot use your office as a community board member to be involved in politics. Going around soliciting petitions saying, I'm a board member, you ought to support this person. That's taboo. But my personal rights to support a candidate as a citizen, as far as I know, was never proscribed.
Right, I mean, let's be clear about what we're talking about. There's a difference, Sylvia, what you were just talking about is whether it would be better to avoid mentioning candidates' names during election season in conjunction with any particular proposal. I think it's worth keeping in mind, but it's also, we have it very clearly from COIB now, that if in the course of identifying a proposal, a public issue, right, just so that people know what you're talking about, it is an issue that arose because it was proposed in the course of public discourse during an election, you are certainly allowed to identify the candidate as the source of the proposal, not as a pro or con, just that's where the proposal comes from. That we now have in writing is perfectly appropriate. So, I mean, I agree with you that it's a good idea to exercise discretion to avoid any appearance that there's any endorsement of a candidate or condemnation of a candidate. That you're totally right. But in terms of being able to use a name, if that's necessary for purposes of identification of where a proposal comes from, the COIB has now come out very clearly and said it's appropriate. So that's just, that part of it is now, I think, put to bed, because that's the answer we got.
But I think Sylvia went beyond that.
Different issue.
The question was, if I choose to support a candidate, contribute to a candidate, campaign with a candidate, I'm free to do that.
As long
I
as
just can't do it, CB member.
right, and it's and I think, but just to be clear, that is not the issue that was being discussed
Correct.
with the COIB. That was not at all the issue. With the COIB, the discussion was whether the community board, to what extent the community board can be involved in endorsing a candidate, or even a charter amendment, you know, a ballot issue, you know, a ballot referendum type issue. The issue you're raising, Sylvia, the second issue you raised is whether a member of the community board can be involved in election activities, electioneering, as you said, you know, working for a candidate on a candidate's behalf. And I think that my understanding is not only are you're very much allowed to do that as a member of a community board, as long as you don't identify yourself as acting in any sort of capacity as a community board member, or even saying you're a community board member for that matter. But otherwise, you're allowed to do that. Now, that's not true in the federal government. Civil service employees are not allowed to participate in political campaigns under the Hatch Act at all. So they really are being taken out of politics. That is not the city. It is absolutely not the way New York City's civil service is organized. And we are, even though unpaid, I think, treated in the
As if we
same
were.
way.
Okay, Sylvia? Sylvia,
What?
did that
I,
clarify? for you?
I gave you my feeling on it, so, go on with your agenda.
Okay.
Status of Community Board 8 awards. Just want to touch on this. I put together here through item G of what I thought were the cogent steps in giving an award. To me, this is the key, one of the keys right here, is that we just don't know, or we should know, why an award is being given. And I will tell you up front, I don't know why the Veterans Award is being given, because they haven't defined it. Being a veteran, was a veteran, married to a veteran, why is the award being given? So, so the first issue, and I know that the Veterans Committee is meeting this week. I'm gonna drop him a note, because I like him to identify the purpose. So for item 1, the committee should identify a purpose. It's a volunteer effort. The battle I had with Sergio was salaried or not salaried. Yes, a soldier in war at any rank is paid for that service. So does that disqualify all veterans from getting an award because they were salaried? Well, my concern is that we're not giving a military honor. We're not judging one person's service versus another. I believe we should be honoring the service to the community and looking at a subset of community members who are veterans. I hope that Sergio clarifies that. After the committee on its own decides that they want to come up with an award, then they bring it to the executive committee, and with a resolution, and the executive committee gives its approval, doesn't vote, gives approval or not, and then a resolution goes before the full board saying,
What is that? Can I interrupt for just a second? A point of information. When you say the executive committee doesn't vote, I'm unclear.
we do not vote in the executive committee,
Period.
period. I mean, there are unique situations where you have to vote, but generally, no, we do not vote. We recommend,
You operate by consensus then, is really the only other option.
by consensus, well, we vet. And if it doesn't work, we say to the chair, bring that back to your committee. We don't think it should go forward.
Right,
No
but there
vote.
could be a difference of opinion in the executive
Yes.
committee, so that's
And
why I
that
say
person
they
can
must
go
act
forward
by
before the board
consensus.
and raise it from the floor, but hopefully that's not the case. It's not been the case yet. Executive committee reviews why committee is, now this is what I'm interpreting. I could be wrong on this and I ask for input. Executive committee reviews what the committee wants to do, and then a resolution goes before the full board. And then there's a public notification, a review of the nominees and the selection process. And here's where things got fuzzy and I created this problem. After the committee has gone through all of this process and selected their honorees, they come before the executive committee and say, we want this 1, 2, 3, 4 people, whatever number, to be the honorees this year. And the executive committee doesn't vote, but they shake their heads and say, fine, we have no, we can't think of a problem.
Okay, Marty, I apologize. I think I just don't follow the steps there. It seems to me now, looking back again at what you've written, that you're suggesting that first there's the standards issue, the criteria, and that's reviewed by the executive committee and followed by a resolution by the full board about the standards. Is that what B refers to? The standards, not the
Committee com-
selection in a given year?
That's two separate issues. B, I'm a committee, all me, I'm a committee, I say, I want to give an award for X. And me as a committee needs to come up with criteria, purpose, intent, why do I want to give this award? Then I come before the exec committee and I say, I'd like to give an award on behalf of Community Board 8 for the following reasons and purposes, and the exec committee can say, that doesn't make sense, or that makes perfect sense. And if they have the nods from the executive committee, then they bring it before the board for approval of that award.
Has that step B, has that been a step that's been taken by the youth committee or the economic development committee? I know you mentioned the veterans, special committee on veterans affairs, but I'm now asking, and the suggestion is that that hasn't happened yet for veterans committee. I understand that.
It has not happened for veterans.
But I'm asking now, even though the Economic Development Committee has in the past given the award, but not for decades by any means, and like the CSA, but also the Youth Committee has for some years made the Comeback Kid Award, but I don't know, is there any place for the Economic Development Committee or the Youth Committee to come back to the Executive Committee presenting their standards and a resolution by the full board? I don't know if that's happened. I don't know if that's what you're suggesting. I'm not being,
At the last, I know it was the last board meeting, and before that, we voted on giving the CSA. A resolution was passed for that purpose.
right.
Now, the difference between CSA and then the rest of them is that the CSA historically is an award set up for and by the community board. And so the resolution of the community board to support it makes perfect sense. And every year since 19, whatever it was established, I established it. There's always been a resolution. You exist and you go forward. In the case that Julie brought up, she identified the specific people on the committee. That was the resolution. I'm not familiar, I'll ask Julie, I don't remember where we are status-wise with the other three.
With the Economic Development Committee, they've recently at the past board meeting, they did their resolution. They set the month change on when they will be presenting moving forward. And the stipulations of why the board is giving out the award is written within the resolution. So, and then the youth committee is meeting this month and they're still working on the criterias. And also look to have the month moving forward when the board will presenting the awards. They're all have been working on it through the term after the LRE try to get them to move ahead, but they are working on it so that we have it in place. The only committee that really hasn't done anything, as far as I'm aware, is the Veterans Committee, which, you know, I'll just continue to work with that committee and see if they can come up with something. The Veterans Committee, I have to note, has not given out any award because of this, because of the uncertainty of why are they giving out an award and to whom. So the Veterans Committee has not issued an award to date.
So for Julie, just to clarify, just for my benefit,
Sure.
the last meeting, it got very rushed at the end, so that
Yeah,
it got,
I know. Sorry about that.
and so, yeah, so I think I just have to look up on that, but that was considered a resolution, and if I look in that resolution, I'll see basically the criteria for the most valuable merchant award, because I think
Yes.
we voted on to ratify the selections, is that right?
That's right. And within that resolution, it states why the committee is awarding such an award. And what we're going to do before the end of the term and definitely over the summer is to make sure that everything is in place. And they will be using how you guys, the CSA committee, discuss the nominees, having the board members or the committee members have the information in front of them, but referring to them as A, B, C, and D. So this way the committee members are aware of who the nominees are without actually naming them until after they're approved. So they're going to take a lot from what the work that your committee recently did with the CSA awards.
So the youth committee is working this month on
Right.
their. Okay.
Right. I think because their last day for applications was yesterday, and the committee is meeting next week. So they'll be hopefully doing the same thing. Like your committee was kind of like the template on how, because of Zoom, and that's where the issue really lies, because of Zoom, to make sure that people's names are respected. And your committee also brought out a good point. You know, we need to advise the nominees, because now that we're on Zoom, what if they don't want their names or even information out there? So it's a work in progress, but it's hopefully will be finished by the end of this term.
Yeah, just to clarify, we were not on Zoom. We made the decision that we would have.
No,
in-person.
I know, but our board meetings are on Zoom.
Right, right.
So when we get to Zoom, the process that you guys created, like when you came to the exec, we were on Zoom at the exec. So that's why we had the nominees' names. They should have
Right.
been on paper with A, B, and C, and D. So because one of the points I think that your committee, the LRE, made was we should know who the nominees are. So that was a nice way of killing
Yeah,
two
no,
birds.
an in-person makes it simpler, but it doesn't really avoid the issue, because an in-person meeting can still have 5 members of the public, and you have people who don't know they've been nominated, and then they're not
know.
chosen, and, you know, the same problem can be
Yeah.
presented, just
Yeah,
less easy for the public to join.
yeah.
It sounds like there's been a decision. I know you and I have had this discussion in the past
Mhm.
via email and in person, that it seems like a decision has been made that all of any award given out is going to be given in the name of the board. So it's your view, and it seems like it's the way we're going, that anytime an award is given out, it's not going to just be the committee. It's going to have to be ratified by the full board.
Always. That's with anything that comes from the board. That's always been like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, you know, I don't think historically the CSA was voted on by the board. And
Sure, it's even in the resolution, in the initial resolution, it
Rather-
clearly states that it has to go to the exec and it has to go to the board. It's clear on the
No,
CSA.
it's clear in the resolution. I don't think it's ever been done before, but that's okay. I'm just telling you what I've observed over the years. And if
Yeah, because I remember it coming to the exec years ago, and when it would come to the exec, like Marty stated, they would give strong recommendations. And back then, if the exec said, I don't think we should do that, it wasn't done. So it definitely went through the exec before it went to the board years ago.
No, I was suggesting that that we didn't have full votes on this stuff at the board.
Correct.
That's what I was saying, Julie. Not that it didn't go to exec.
Yeah.
What I've suggested is that exec was this gatekeeper, but the committee actually selected the awardees, and it never actually went for discussion or vote to the board. The board was involved to the extent of being there at the general meeting for the award ceremony, but it didn't get discussed or voted on by the board itself. As a matter of the practice that I've observed, not swearing to every year, but generally speaking, I don't think the board got involved. The board as a whole got involved in the selection process at all. That
No,
was
not the selection, the
No.
approval,
approval. Yes, approval.
not the selection. No, not the selection, the approval.
I'm saying my view is, by my recollection of seeing how the board functioned, that the board did not get involved in the approval process, or of course not the selection process.
Yeah.
In the approval process, I don't believe the board did that. I'm not saying you're wrong about reading the resolution. It just didn't happen.
We're talking about 2 tiers, and that creates some confusion. The first tier There's 1980s when CSA was first developed. And it was structured, and we knew what was going on. There was no vote at the public meeting. And the second tier are the things that have grown up in the last 3-5 years, which have no histories prior to that. And the issue that I raised was that these awards are being given in our name, and we have the foggiest idea what they're for, why they're being given, and a whole host of questions. So 2 years ago, it was the last year, we had the problem, and I hope that the board members have learned since that if we're going to have a vote on X nominees, that it does become a public debate at that point. So it hopefully becomes somewhat perfunctory. The committee came forward, the exec reviewed it, the board is gonna vote. It should be voting in a positive way without creating possible, what's the word,
Controversy,
beyond controversy,
embarrassment.
and what's above that. When I say something that embarrasses you in public, you can sue me, and you can sue me for it. What is that?
Defamation.
Defamation. We don't reach the point of defamation. Him, you want to give it to him? But
Well-
the issue also became then with self-nomination. The issue then became, if we're going to give an award for a merchant, is it because he's a good merchant, a big merchant, a rich merchant,
Well, I
or
don't,
because he's done something for the community, or she?
but I don't know that that's ever been pinned down. That's my own view, but Julie said we have a resolution. I'll go back and look at it. I'm not gonna make trouble or anything like that, but I still felt that it was murky. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the way that was done for CSA this year, which I don't think was representative of most past years that I've seen in the last decade or so, it did work smoothly, although we were doing it very, very quickly under time pressure. But yes, there were these short descriptions. It seemed like no controversy or difference of opinion would be created, but you never know. And I don't think that even doing it that way avoids the problem, Julie. Because even though a lot of careful consideration went into it, and you had what Marty calls vetting by the executive,
Right.
I still think that once you hand out pieces of paper that match letters with names for board meeting, you do have the possibility that someone is going to have an issue. And I think if the goal is to avoid that situation, my personal view, and this applies to youth and it applies to economic development and it applies to veterans if there's going to be an award, and to CSA as well. I feel that the more prudent approach is to, however you want to describe the award, is to have it be approved at exec and not to have a full vote at the board. That the board can delegate responsibility to its committees, not just for fact finding, but can delegate. I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
I think that that's something that's worthy of consideration. I understand that we had no problem this year with two different sets of awards in one meeting at the end, this year.
So Marty, do you think that that's a consideration that maybe your committee wants to set up a policy?
Well, that's the email I sent you, the
Yeah.
date somewhere, which I felt a public vote at that point could be disastrous.
Yeah.
As this last year or 2 years ago, I remember. And so if we've agreed that the award is being given for X reasons, reasons only, then if it's gone through the committee and respect what the committee has done, that it's gone through the exec saying, I have no problem with these people, then I would give the award without a public vote, which could. I mean, I had a fight with David Gelman, who thought he was right in attacking an honoree.
Yeah.
I finally convinced him he was wrong, but it took a lot of doing.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys draft something we could put in policy.
Okay, well, we're kind of caught on time.
No, well, we have time. We have like at least over the summer. We could bring it in September, or we could do it in June.
Fine. So that's the second item for future LRE consideration.
And then this way we'll have everything that all the committees came up with and you guys could review it and then we're good to go at least by September.
And we'll be able to look back and say we've accomplished something.
I would like to just point out, Julie, because, and again, it's not your job, but you're aware of what's going on at the upcoming youth committee meeting. And you indicate that they're going to, deal with their criteria issue, and they haven't
Right.
necessarily put that to bed. I've raised in the past that in the presence of multiple Yankee awards to youth
Mhm.
with an overlapping age group, I question the coexistence of a separate Comeback Kid award
Mhm.
in view of that. And I think that it's necessary for the committee to really distinguish what we are as a board giving out as an award as contrasted with what the Yankees are doing. And if they are too close in type, I question the need for the board to be doing it.
Okay. Okay.
Personally, I'd rather get the money, so I'd like that award for if I were youth, but I'm not a youth anymore.
But akin to that, and the concern I
Stephen, would you mind sending Ramdad and CC Farah and I that so that they could add it onto their agenda? They can add it
Yeah.
either this month or the following month,
Like Marty, I wish I could find my email where I raised this issue, but yes,
I probably haven't.
I probably wrote it to you.
But akin to this is I don't understand why the Comeback Kid pool is limited to community centers. There are religious institutions, et cetera, who have youth programs who probably have eligible kids who could also be eligible for this award. So I don't know what, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. So I'm when it was first devised, why it was so specific.
Yeah, I really believe this started with Lamont when he was chair of the youth committee.
Yes, it did. And back then, the youth committee used to meet during the daytimes with a lot of the agencies, and that's maybe, I'm just guessing, maybe that's why, because there was a lot more interaction during the daytime with the agencies.
It would be a daytime meeting and they would meet
Yes.
at various, there are not that many local
Yeah.
settlement houses and the like. But
Yeah.
yeah, and Lamont as a chair had a particular, talent for
Yeah.
better support from local merchants and the like for the
Mhm.
awards, getting, funding them and things like that. And I really think that he was the genesis of it, but I don't know that he was juggling Yankee awards at the same time.
No, the Yankee is totally separate.
Yeah, no,
The
but
Yankee-
yeah.
But the Yankee Award doesn't limit it to a specific type of youth group.
Right, but it is an overlap in age.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna,
the Yankees is coming from the Yankees. That's not from us, so.
Yeah.
No, but we're choosing the recipients.
Yeah.
That's the problem. At least that's my view about the problem.
all right, I'm gonna move the agenda. You have an assignment to contact the youth committee.
Yeah.
Okay,
Copying Julie.
and I have it down here, but you've already discussed it, so I'll drop it for now. Does youth have two awards, Yankees and the Comeback Kid? But the $750 is worth distributing.
Yeah.
And they get to go to a ball game besides. All right, so I can spend time on this, but believe I sent them all to you. mean, I love some of these. Guy was supposed to use the city vehicle to transport unhoused people to a homeless shelter. In a joint statement with the board, the Department of Homeless Services, the city laborer agreed to forfeit 5 days annual leave, valued at approximately $14.50, and a 15 calendar day suspension because he made 32 stops in both Bronx and Yonkers for work, for items unrelated to the Department of Homeless Services. So there's a lot of this, and I'll leave it to you to read. The only thing I forgot to mention earlier is my apologies for having the meeting tonight. Even though I went over during the summer, we worked out with Julie and Farah, and I had the calendar, and I messed up on the dates of a holiday. And so I got bumped from my own date and got an alternate date in the first week in April. And then Chuck ran into a problem. He had to be in New Hampshire for what do you call it? Before the Supreme Court in New Hampshire on a AFT matter. And so he couldn't use his date, so I switched dates. We ended up today. I'm glad to see everybody here. Spreadsheet I sent out Thursday. Old business, new business, they all have to follow. The Commission on Civic Engagement says we shouldn't be calling old business and new business. I will correct it for next month.
What should it be called?
I remember. I have to look it up. But she said, not this.
Not unfinished business?
That may have been finished, unfinished. I don't know. Next meeting, I hope, is Monday, May 12th. And just one aside, going back to the Parks Department, the Parks Committee, I did tune in to the Borough President's hearing on Bally's in what used to be the Trump golf course. And my concern in general is that the whole concept of alienation of parks may be at risk. Bally's is prepared to spend over $1 billion to put together a facility and nightclub and restaurants and performance theater and convention center and all that, and fix up the roads and do better with the overpasses. And if it goes through, it'll be the second highest employer in the Bronx, the first one being Montefiore. So there's a lot on the table, and my gut is that it'll probably, I don't know what the borough president has already done, but my guess is it will go through and get city approvals. If it does get city approvals, then it's one of several applicants to the state to have what a conceal license,
When you say city approval, would that be a vote of what?
eventually the city council. They have a proposal.
No, I know there's gonna be like 3 licenses granted for the city of New York for casinos. And people think that they're likely to go to Aqueduct and whatever the place in Yonkers is, Yonkers Raceway, as having been established as gambling centers already, which leaves one kind of open for about 5 or so proposals, including Hudson Yards and Midtown, or Theater District, whatever. And I'm just unclear. It's a local land use thing. So the borough president was holding a hearing on citing Bally's where the Trump golf
On the
course is
next-
now.
But it's in the chain of who has to approve it until it gets to the final approval,
Right, which is a state decision.
which at the city level, final approval, then it goes to the state,
To
who
pick
has
one
ultimate
or 3,
responsibility.
whatever. Right. Okay, so this hearing was about, was at the borough level,
Yes.
whether to approve the possibility of this being an applicant.
Now, this is one piece I don't understand, and I only stayed for the first hour, so I only heard the presentation. But apparently, Bally's needs a chunk of land, which is city property, city park land. And they're willing to purchase a second piece of land for the purpose of returning the equivalent area to parkland. But I didn't stay long enough to know what the two pieces, jigsaw pieces are. But it's my sense that this place is, if approved up and down, this becomes a major crack in the park alienation concept. But that's not our committee, that's Parks and the board perhaps. Actually, it's not us, it's now beyond us. And by the way, the community board disapproved it. At the first level, it was disapproved.
By the local community
local
board that
community board.
encompasses that golf
Right.
course.
I don't remember what their specific issue was. It may have been alienation of parks, I don't remember. But it'll certainly, from, I don't play golf, what was presumably a very quiet golf, you go drive up, you get your golf clubs, you get a tee time, you play golf, the neighbors don't hear you. But if you have a facility which is gonna attract thousands of people at any given time, then neighbors are gonna be disrupted one way or the other. I have, if you want, I have a picture of a rendering from them of what the site would look like, not the site, the facility would look like. At any rate, I'm done unless there's any old or new business I haven't brought up.
But that would not be our immediate bailiwick as a
Not
community.
us at all.
Right.
Other than the concept of alienation of parks.
Right.
I just want to thank you, Marty, for always following up on everything that we send you. Thank you.
Well, while I still have my health, I still have my interest. Thank you.
I know, but we threw a lot at you this past month.
All right, well, Sylvia, any further comments?
Nope. Good meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Sylvia, agree?
Yes.
I would say no, but what do I want to stay here for? Okay,
9 p.m. sharp.
so have a nice evening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your holidays and hope to attend a full board meeting shortly in the near future. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
I stopped sharing, so what happened here? Nothing. Now this, I have to stop. How do I stop the recording?
Make it bigger. I mean, the whole, oh, there you go. You got notes.